I was like, even though I didn't know a lot about her career, I guess there's not a lot of, the resume in a way is short because it's like all Phillips and then there's like a bunch of stuff underneath it, right? As opposed to someone who was like, I was at Amazon for 2 years and then I went to Facebook for a year and then I went to Google for a year, and like they have all the sort of like typical movements. Like we said, it was really unusual that someone stays somewhere for so long and cultivates a career, starting especially from like a very low level designer. I think that this was exciting because of its uniqueness. It was exciting because it's a different possibility for a career. I like to think that the way that she worked at Philips was the way people used to work at places where they would stay for a whole career, for the whole life. And she could still suddenly leave Philips, work somewhere else instead for many, many years. The idea that someone could stay somewhere even longer than 5 years is very unique in design. And maybe we can tell companies that like, hey, that's possible. You can get a designer and keep them for years if you treat them right. If you let them do these things. She had autonomy, she had training, she had the ability to get all these additional skills, to be relevant, to feel fulfilled, to feel challenged.
To move,
To move and to go across the world and experience different things. That is very exciting. Because it is rare, but because it is also, I think, attractive. I think a lot of people would say, if there was a company that wanted to do those things for me, then I could work for them. Along with, she said, good mission, a good product that's worth doing.
Yeah.
These are exciting prospects, right?
Good management too. She's clearly very intentional. I don't think that there's any part of her that has stayed in that role because of lack of opportunity, right? Like, she's very intentional. She's very talented. So clearly it's been this ability to keep assessing and realizing that this company is giving her everything she needs, and more opportunities to grow and become a stronger designer and have stronger relationships, deeper meaning. So that's really special. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we get very caught up on the startups and very young companies where all the possibilities are like free put at Google. But Philips is a company that is here for like over 100 years. And that's actually the company that gave her enough growth and passion possibilities that she dedicated career to it. I think it's also good to keep in mind that you need to look for a place where you can really share values with and not just check what's the most trendy place to work right now.
Yeah. Like, some of these places have been around for a reason, and they're still around because they clearly do good, worthy work.
I wonder how Philips learned the value of design early, though. It seems like they're a company that really supports, promotes, etc. design. And, I think sometimes big companies don't get that reputation. Like, I think that they are sort of special, maybe.
My guess is that they're from Netherlands, which is like country soaking with
design,
understanding for design.
Yeah, it is very in the fabric. That makes sense. I wonder how many people in the US know that Philips is from the Netherlands. I feel like that might not be common knowledge, actually.
How many people in the US knows where Netherlands is?
Oh, come on.
Oh, no, don't ask that question. You will not be satisfied with the answer.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Well, that's where I did my study abroad, so I could locate it on a map.
Well, to be fair, I had to check where Cleveland is.
Hey, that's totally fair.
Oh, no.
I could get close. I don't know if I'd get it right away.
That's fair. Hey everyone, we want to welcome you to the Beyond Ray podcast with the Seattle Women in Design Group. Today we're talking to Andrea Feuerabend. She is the interim design director of the Smart Connected Imaging team at Philips. And she has very generously agreed to come and chat with us all about her really impressive career that has spanned, multiple countries, many years, very interesting projects. Andrea, we're so grateful that you're here today.
Thanks so much, Kate. Pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you do today, just in your own words.
Oh, absolutely. So as the role of an interim design director, I actually work together with multiple different businesses within Philips, mainly related to diagnostic imaging, and that's ultrasound, computed tomography, magnetic resonance, and diagnostic X-ray. Where we work together with leadership teams to assure that we have a consistent customer experience. So I'm working at this time a bit more on a strategic role together with the leadership team and managing design teams from a content perspective. And the design teams have various different skills and capacities or capabilities, varying from industrial design, UI UX design, usability. And then we have actually also a global team looking at services, for instance, or graphics or communications. But and so basically we're looking at portfolios in our company, which actually also inhale hardware, software, and services. And my role and responsibility is to assure qualitative outcomes that we deliver in time, to our business partners so that the solutions can be launched, are tested with our end users, and actually have a consistent customer experience and no safety risks.
Andrea, you have somewhat rare story within the industrial design profession, which is that you've stayed and grown for many years within the same company. You traveled continents, you built teams, you worked with so many different designers, but it was all within Philips, which me personally, I understand it because this is where I started my career. My very first internship was Philips Consumer Lifestyle. I loved it. And there was many people around me who've been there for years. You're one of them. How many years has it been?
I started 2004, which is actually quite a long time ago. It's multiple decades almost.
And was it Philips all the way? Did you have any hesitations during it?
It was Philips all the way. And to be honest, I never intended to stay so long with one company. But it actually all comes together on what is actually your own purpose and what are your own core values. How does those core values link to company mission and vision and also the company philosophy? For me, it's really important, trust, integrity, and honesty, that I can work with actually my colleagues in the design field, but also with the business, that it's almost like a friendly interaction, and actually also colleagues become friends. And in the design community, actually, they became my friends and also my family, which makes also a social component, which is actually quite important, which increases also a bit the loyalty to a company if you see them as a family. Then, of course, it's important what you work on. Is that in your interest? Are you passionate about your work? Does it excite you to get out of bed? And of course, those are moments in time which vary during your career for sure. But I always had moments when the moment I doubted there was something super exciting and interesting coming around the corner, either a new project or a different team or a new country opportunity, which kind of makes it exciting again. So I felt it was never really a routine work throughout all of those years. Also, our company is so large that it almost feels sometimes it consists out of multiple different companies. And if you change your team, it's almost like a different company. Of course, there are company values and philosophies similar, but we have also a lot of acquired companies which still had kind of different way of workings, and in some cases we also had to align them to our corporate identity. So you always had sort of a mix of interactions with people. Then it also matters for whom you work. So who is your manager? Who is the leadership team? What is the company culture? And of course, if you have someone you like, you appreciate, who is supportive and inspiring, it also helps you to stick longer with a company. And for me, actually, all these interpersonal relations are probably, together with purpose and core values, really, really important. I also really appreciated always that, and I don't want to kind of glorify Philips, but I really like to manage my own time. And quite often in my career, I worked remote. So when I was in the Netherlands, I went to the office, but the moment I moved to the US, I had a lot of interactions remote, and my manager was never at site. Nevertheless, there was a lot of trust. And if I started my work at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., or worked during the night, no one really micromanaged. So you had kind of complete trust and freedom as long as you kind of met your commitments. And of course, you have your meetings and you have to manage your own responsibilities, which is actually wonderful. Of course, maybe now in our times with remote working, this became a new norm, but it was not so normal probably 10, 15 years ago.
Especially in the field like design, where you are like expected often to be there in present.
Right.
What are all the roles, different roles that you've been working with within those years?
Do you mean my own design roles I had?
Yeah, because well, obviously now you're like on the director position, but you started as industrial designer, and what happened next?
Correct. Yeah, I started sort of as a junior product designer or industrial designer at that time. I think I was probably 5 years in that role, supporting all sorts of product design activities for senior designers. After that time, I had sort of a senior product design role. After that time, we basically, our Philips job titles never really matched industry standards. So we had then a role which is called product design consultant. So that is sort of a leadership role within a domain. So you are a key responsible designer for a portfolio, and you have sort of a few designers basically working at your site and supporting you. And then, of course, then you have sort of the same role, product design consultant, as a senior role. And after that, I became the experience design business lead. Which is actually a role where you start to have a strategic partnership with one specific business, and you, from a content-wise, manage an entire business organization for design. So you are sort of a design business partner. That is sort of a Philips terminology. And for one business, I'm also kind of part of the leadership team. So together with marketing, finance, engineering, and I represent experience design.
I wonder, did it feel like going up the ladder, or was it just like a monkey playground where switching these different areas, which all were design? Or was it like going straight up? Did you have the plan? This is how it goes?
No, not at all. And I'm not a career type either. It kind of naturally happened. And it probably happened because when I moved to the US, I was for a really long time the only designer at a location, and I had to play multiple different roles. So it organically happened that I had to basically expand my skill set also to UI UX, to usability, because my team was in the Netherlands and I had to do sort of tests myself. I had to look into service design. I had to, on a daily interaction, basically communicate with marketing, R&D, clinical, finance, procurement all the time. You had to learn to talk business language. So it was a playground, but you were sort of pushed sort of in cold waters, and you start to swim and you develop new skill sets. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it's definitely not a steep ladder. It's kind of a gradual process, and you kind of learn year by year, and depending on what basically life or your daily business situation confront you with.
What I'm hearing is that you had all these opportunities, even though you've been within the same company all the time. But I guess that, like, if you were about to start as the one and only designer in the new location and learn all these things, you wouldn't get this position if you were just someone from the outside. But like, you've been already very trusted member of the Philips family, and then like so many people had confidence to put you on a spot. So I think like there is a big value in just staying where you are and growing there, and like reaching for these new opportunities. Before we go to other questions, talking about you moving to US, when we met, you told me that you were actually going to come to the East Coast, and this is the offer you got, and then you ended up in Cleveland.
That's right.
You want to tell more about this story and how it all felt? Especially talking about a European coming to the US and having this reality check. Oh, this is different country.
Right. I think I probably have to kind of dig a bit down memory lane how that really happened. There was a moment when I was kind of in our studio in the Netherlands, and my manager asked me if I would have had any interest to move abroad. And to be honest, I'm not sure why he actually came up with that question. I was like, okay, do you have anything to offer, or what countries do you have in mind? And he said, well, we have locations in China and in the US. And at that time, I had I was interested to work in China, but not necessarily relocate to China. But I was more open for the US. But we had a studio in Boston, in the Boston area. So there was nothing in Cleveland. So therefore, naturally, we're not starting new hubs in new areas. So therefore, he painted the picture that I moved to the East Coast, to the Boston area. But the original reason to move to the US was that one of our business units in Cleveland requested more local support. And I was actually working for years remote. And there's a lot of time zone challenges, especially kind of with 6 hours. So it's definitely easier if you're in the same time zone. And quite often it also happens that businesses, they not as necessarily want you to be in the same time zone, but actually sitting next to you, sort of as one of their own staff. And it happened apparently in one of the discussions with our leadership team that the agreement was that the respective designer sits at the business location instead of the design hub. So I got the agreement that I could move to the US, but it was then a shift from Boston to Cleveland, which was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, had you already agreed to it? You were like ready to move, and then they changed the location?
I think I agreed, but there's a positive caveat to it, because at that time I worked together with a friend of mine from Israel for the same business unit. So she was in the clinical domain, I was in the design domain, and we really teamed up for customer experience to pitch for new visionary directions. And she was supposed to move to the US as well, to Cleveland. So it's again coming back to my desire to work together with friends. So since she moved, I was like, yeah, that's fine. So actually being together with a friend is more important than being at a fancy city.
That's being very mean about Cleveland, guys.
Yeah, but it's still like, I'm moving to Boston, and then here is your airfare to Ohio. Enjoy.
It's a bit of a bait and switch. No, there's some really good design in the Midwest. I was also going to say, we can throw Boston under the bus too, not really needing to.
Oh, yeah. I got my first parking ticket there.
Oh, man. Well, but then, and we're going to talk more about this, I think, later on, but you built something incredible in Cleveland. It was a really pivotal moment for you as a designer, right?
Actually, maybe the pivoting moment was that for 5 years I worked there as the only designer, but the intent was to build there a design team. But I kind of grew a lot of resilience and a skill set, and I think that was after 5 years then also seen by the organization that you can make quite an impact as a designer if you're at a location and build a trusted ally with the leadership team, which is in healthcare. Again, it's different because consumer products, they also you sell by the design qualities. And in healthcare, that was for a really long time not necessarily the case because it was the clinical function was more important. Now things changed, thankfully, but still, for decades, we really had to sell and advocate for design, product design, UI, UX, and not to mention service.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it built the foundation, but I think if you're kind of moving into the direction that I was trying to build a design team, that actually happened when I moved to Seattle to a different business.
Do you think of Cleveland, and not because of the city, to Ginger's point, but just that time in your life? Is that one of the more challenging couple years in design that you've had to work through?
Yes and no. Because definitely, if you're on your own, you can't rely on all your design colleagues which are nearby. For sure, you kind of start to grow a thicker skin, and you start to grow an opinion and a mindset, and so you need to kind of basically by yourself push design through and build designs. So you have no one sort of to wait for. So you probably grow as a person. It's not easy, but I'm actually thankful for it. So I also learned during that time that I really enjoy challenges, and actually that makes it really interesting for me, which I did not know about myself earlier.
So it sounds like there's so much that you developed of your skill set, about these different functions of design, and even beyond that in terms of the, marketing and business sides of things. How, I want to back up a little bit, and how much of that was presented to you in your schooling, and did it inform you when you were at work, or was it fully sort of homegrown once you were working at Philips?
I would say it's fully homegrown. I think that most of the skill sets are learning on the job, and having conversations with friends or reading books. Only later in my career, in the last couple of years, I had mentorship and coaching by a senior design leadership team, but also I had people in the business I could kind of spare ideas with, which is kind of really helpful. And at one point, I chose to start an MBA, which was a personal interest of mine, because I had the feeling, as a designer, you have a bit of a really emotional language, if I can put it in that way. So it's not kind of a harsh fact business language. And quite often I felt I'm really not understood or not taken seriously. There could have been many reasons. However, but I felt I needed to have more foundational knowledge in order to speak business language and make good design pitches, which really matter. Because ultimately, what I also learned in the time when I sat together with all the different disciplines, that ultimately we are a company who is kind of also driven by finances. So we have to make profit to pay salaries. So it can't only be about making beautiful designs, which at a naive time when I started, that was my idea, that you can kind of all your dreams come true. So it's good to understand how business cases are built, that you really have to take care, what is kind of really valuable for a customer, what makes it an impact to the customer, which could very well differ from what a designer believes makes a true impact. So certain designs you put on the table may be important, but it may be not the number one or number two choice of a customer. And therefore, this is really important. Also, the willingness to buy competitive advantages, and think kind of more in a broader spectrum, and really making kind of more business-like design pitches. That was kind of my main driver to also kind of look more into kind of getting some business foundation knowledge.
Can you get sort of granular into what you think design education or designers themselves miss when they're trying to pitch to more business-minded folks? I mean, short of everybody going to business school, which is a good idea, and learning it for themselves, what do you think are sort of the pivotal things that we are lacking?
Definitely, in our times, everything relates back to cost. So it's kind of how feasible is your design idea? Usually you kind of have to look at it from a resource point of view, how fast and how costly is it also for instance, an engineering team to bring solutions to market. And quite often design ideas have enabling conditions, and that's often a technology or a certain technical architecture which need to be established so that you can build sort of your shell around it. It could be then related to something smart, something connected, something miniaturized, and all of that needs to be developed upfront. And this is something which needs to be then calculated. So I think it's good to have you don't necessarily have to have an engineering background, but you need to understand that it comes with a price, and time to market and cost is really important for sure. I think probably it's also the whole foundation of a business thinking kind of, marketing is critical, really understanding the customer, having a lot of customer validation, which is something we usually do in design school. However, often the customer, they don't really, or they may tell us something and they basically act slightly different or operate systems slightly different. So you may need multiple different approaches to actually get to the final answer, and also to understand how, even if they desire a product, are they really willing to pay for it and put their own money behind it? Yeah, and then probably also kind of overall economics is kind of good sort of to understand certain drivers. For instance, at the moment, we face a lot of assurance of supply issues, kind of to get parts, which makes things, again, I think ultimately everything comes back to cost and willingness to pay. I hear myself speaking, but yes, it's sometimes sad, but that is important to at least to understand.
Yeah, it's the harsh reality that designers kind of put our heads in the cloud about, maybe sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have your feet on the ground a little bit.
Right.
So you kind of mentioned that you were drawn for personal reasons to like additional training and education, for example, the MBA, but that you gathered all these other skills, right? And I see that you're putting them together in your consideration of design and the business. So you see all of these needs that maybe someone that's like fresh out of design school isn't thinking of. Were you hungry for these things to sort of like improve your personal experience of working, or were you thinking of it as like, this is going to make me a better designer? Or was it, this is going to be better for Philips and how they do business, or maybe like a combination of those things?
I would say, maybe a combination. The two main drivers is, so a personal driver is I want to make an impact and I would like to bring something to market. I'm not really satisfied with making a beautiful design concept. I'm usually satisfied if something is realized. So therefore, I try to learn the skills, everything which is related to negotiation, to make my point clear. If the point is still for some reason rejected, it's a different story, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to communicate. Ultimately, I do think I want to make something beneficial for Philips too, but in the context of doing something meaningful for customers. And that is maybe my own idealism, and maybe also kind of that of many designers, that they want to contribute to the world, especially people who work in healthcare. There is a certain purpose. Yeah, especially if you kind of look at the healthcare world in nowadays, where it's quite challenging, and you definitely don't want to be sick and be in the healthcare system. So therefore, I also want to contribute and make sure that people are diagnosed really early on, they get a really fast treatment, it's accurate, diagnosed, that there are no failures, and you have kind of a good outcome.
I almost want to move us to this other question we have here that talks about like doing design in different countries, because it reminds me of talking about the quality of healthcare. That's something that's talked about in the different countries. Is that something that is relevant for Philips, that healthcare is different in different countries and affected how you work?
Oh, absolutely. And also, you can even break it down. Then if you use one technology, is it an ultrasound or a computer tomography? Just workflows are entirely different. And it's predominantly because if I compare US and China, in China you have an enormous patient throughput. When you have kind of maybe 20 patients in North America, you have 100 in a day, comparable in China. So therefore, your system need to be powerful enough to manage that throughput, but you also need to support in all the designs you do. You need to manage that throughput.
Despite of the different reality of the industry in different countries, did you notice differences of like working with teams in different places?
Oh, absolutely.
Or like in general, like the design, like how is the design process on the spot in Amsterdam versus elsewhere?
Well, you definitely have differences in the teams, and that just purely comes by cultural differences. Of course, meanwhile, there's a lot of globalization, but nevertheless, you do have cultural differences, and that is also related to that you need to know how you communicate with one another, and you kind of don't do any mistakes to offend someone, which could kind of harm your business relationship. And kind of, especially me as a German, I'm coming from a culture which is one of the most direct cultures. I think Israel is first, then Germany, and then the Netherlands. Yeah. So kind of, I probably was not appreciated in my beginning time in the US when I kind of was really direct and said, no, I don't like it. That's not the way how you communicate in the US. And also kind of, how you interact with China. You have to be really careful to not overstep certain hierarchies, or if you want to get something done, you need to really understand who is the decision makers, and you don't need to argue with a poor engineer who has no decision-making power.
That's really interesting. Do you feel like you carry those values back and forth with you a lot, or have you gotten very good at sort of code switching instead?
That's a good point. I'm not really sure how aware or how many blind spots I am. Of course, also in Philips, you get a lot of interpersonal or intercultural trainings, and maybe it would be even good to refresh them after a time. I think it's probably you're more aware if you travel to a country, for sure, because then it's a mind switch. But in our daily life, we talk with colleagues who move from different cultures to your own location, or you're in a telephone conference with kind of 5 different regions present. And to be honest, that is really then hard to manage. And in your communication style, you can't really manage how do you need to talk to someone from China versus from Germany versus from the Netherlands. So it's then, probably I kind of developed my own intercultural style, and I may or may not offend people, but I smile a lot and try to make up.
I'm sure you have fewer blind spots than the rest of us who have not done that work, though. I'm sure you're already light years ahead. Do you mind actually? Can you tell us a story about maybe a product that you all tried to make that you thought would just be universally accepted and then was just quite a miss for a particular market and had to be altered?
I'm not sure if we ever had a miss for a market, because usually our systems, they take a really, really long time to develop. So sometimes 7 years, and we do a lot of market testing. And even if it's not done by design, it is done by the business counterparts. So you would not launch if it's not sold in certain markets. You may not hit it as you anticipated, but basically, I think you always make sure kind of your core markets are included. It could be that it's less successful in certain regions. So I know, for instance, it's sometimes really hard to design for a 99th and 1 percentile and basically have the whole inclusion for kind of all your system articulation incorporated.
Do you remember from your early career days a breakthrough when you realized that the market you go to makes such a big difference? I'm asking because I had this breakthrough back in Philips, and this is when I realized that basically working in different countries is the best value I can bring as designer, growing this experience of understanding that the world is not the same everywhere.
Maybe the breakthrough is the difference to China, which is so 180 degrees. And actually for a really long time, not only the design team, but the whole business team designed more for the Western market. Also because this was a bit our flagship and core markets. And expansion to China came later in the time. But indeed, even the difference from Europe to America is different. I must say, in the businesses I worked in the past, there are probably more similarities from Europe and North America, and that was not such an eye-opening moment. In ultrasound, it's really different because user groups are completely different. So, for instance, if you compare CT and MR, which are big machines, you lay on a table, you're moved in to kind of a tiny hole, and then there's an operator on the other side. It's all really automated. So workflows are quite similar in Europe, but also in North America. In ultrasound, it's different because the US market is clinicians, they interpret the image, but you have actually people who acquire the image. And that's kind of a whole profession. It's sort of, they call sonographers, they're image takers, and then they tell stories with the images acquired. So you have actually two people. That's a job of two people. One is acquiring the image and one is reading the image. In Europe, it's one person doing the same. So it's a scanning physician. And that's actually an education, which is actually quite common in European countries, not in all, but in some, that you take an ultrasound machine in order to rule out or rule in your clinical hypothesis. And of course, if you have, as a doctor, something in mind, you operate a machine entirely different as a person who, you're not a clinician. You just, of course, you have clinical knowledge, but you capture images and you just capture a bunch and then send it over, and someone else who has never seen the patient is reading them. Mm. This was definitely an eye-opening moment that machines are used so different, but you have to develop solutions which meet all of the needs.
I remember a story which was eye-opener for me, if I can plug it in, but I think it's kind of funny. It was when I was doing my first internship at Philips, and air fryers were a big product. I was working also on one of them. And there were like two sizes. One, which was very popular in like European market, and there was the XL, which I heard was a hit in the US. And my way of thinking was, obviously the XL is for Americans because they eat a lot of French fries. This is what it is. They just eat a lot. Later that year, I moved to the US. And I discovered, everything is bigger in the US. If you put the smaller air fryer to the American kitchen, like standard American kitchen, it would just look unproportional. And like, we all have like sink, dishwasher, oven, despite in the US, they're like 50% bigger. It's something I never thought about. And now I have this understanding that I need to think about what I don't know.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And always keep in mind that I don't know, I'm just guessing. I think it helps me in everyday work.
Right. I have a follow-up question. Just how do you work to remove your personal bias, right? You're interacting with people. Some of them are more or less similar than the way you grew up. And I think it's really natural as a human to just have an opinion about Americans eat too many French fries, right? How do you try your best to notice that you're doing that, or to remove, your personal opinions out of it?
It's easier if you do it from a customer perspective. I must say I was not really good at it in the very beginning. So I think I can remember, I think my first year with Philips, I designed kind of a product, had a interview with a clinical specialist, and I wrote a clinical document afterwards, but I kind of completely rephrased her words, and she was flipping out when she read the document. She said, "That's not what I said." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's how I heard it and how I wanted to hear it." So that was definitely a huge failure, and I offended that person enormously. She never wanted to work with me. But the more I probably had also more usability angle to try to take the design hat off, that you really wanted to have confirmed what you kind of put out there, and really take it neutral and just try to listen and purely analyze what the user said. It's easier. But of course, it's different if you design for an end user, or if you interact with your colleagues. And I think probably there I may have a lot of biases and a lot of blind spots. We do have in our company biases trainings, which is actually good. And we do also a lot of reflection, and we do 380-degree reflections and interviews to get also feedback, how we are kind of seen by our peers, superiors, managers, which is kind of always good feedback. But yeah, probably I'm better meanwhile after years of experience with customers than probably a lot of learning spots still with my peers, but I do my best. But yeah.
So some of the stuff that you've learned over the years and that has infrastructure at Philips, are you responsible for teaching like the rest of the team that you've built and people that you're responsible for? Do you work on this with them, with the reflection and things like that?
I think we just started to kind of work a bit more on our culture. We're also just in the middle of kind of going through a reorg where we are kind of a bit more focused on creating kind of a solid team culture and making sure we have kind of open and honest conversations. So I would say it's a new activity. I just sort of started.
Do you feel like Philips is directing that a lot and like telling you how to be a leader, or there's things that you inherently know or feel or want to do and you're inserting those?
I think it's a combination. I think I'm a really empathic person, so I listen a lot to kind of people in my surrounding, but also to my counterparts and my team. So I think that makes it easier. But for sure, the moment you are kind of on a trajectory for a leadership position or for a management position, you do get a lot of trainings or even assessments that you kind of, last year we had kind of a session where we were basically with an actor put in a position that we had of kind of either an upset customer or a frustrated team member, and we had to sort of deal with the situation ad hoc. So we had literally no time to prep. And then we were basically, I think it was a psychologist, analyzed, and we got feedback on how we did, and also a lot of access on behaviors, where you kind of actually where your strength is and where you have room for improvement. And you got a lot of suggestions how to improve, which is actually really helpful on a personal level, but also on in a business environment.
Interesting. And in terms of like becoming a leader and like transitioning into that stuff, did it feel like you got a new title and then suddenly boom, they hit you with a bunch of trainings and you felt like a manager, you were responsible for people, or did you kind of have to ease into it? Or did it take a while to sort of feel like, oh yeah, I'm a people leader?
Yeah, in my career, it was always really graduate. Actually, you had to prove yourself for years to get a certain position. And at the moment you got it, I was like, yeah, but I kind of do it already for 3 years. What? And I must say, I'm still not a direct report, a people manager. Again, even if I do it, but I think with a new role, an official design director role, that would come with reporting lines. And of course, then you definitely have to learn way more skill sets if you kind of do a role officially versus if you do it unofficially.
I'm trying to imagine you learning more skills than you already have.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I think the people manager role is probably one of the most challenging if you really care about people. And yeah, you have to kind of deal with a lot of personal stories. And yeah, I think it's really important that you have this skill set. I think for everything else, it's easier to grow into and expand your design skill sets. Not that you have no responsible for sure, but I think this is the moment you really deal with people and you have a responsibility, and I have deep respect for that job.
Based on the wording, it sounds like it's way beyond how you manage this person as a designer. Am I reading that right?
It depends. I would say you would still interact eventually in a similar way with the designers, but if you are a direct reporting line, you have more responsibilities to help with a career growth path, with all sort of other complication. Actually, people would come to you even and sharing sort of their personal burdens, because it could be an example that someone is underperforming, but there may be certain personal problems, or someone is kind of hoping to be promoted, and you don't have the position, or someone is kind of demotivated and want to leave, but you're really dependent on the domain knowledge. So there's all sort of things you need to manage. And this is something you definitely have to learn also, how that works in an organization, how you can support and how you enable.
That's really encouraging to hear. I think sometimes there's sort of the nightmare thinking that people can have about having a bad manager and not getting the support that they need. So it's nice to hear that there are people in those positions that care about it enough to, it sounds like it's still a work in progress.
Definitely.
Okay, so is it my signature question?
Yeah, unless there's anything that we've talked about that, somebody wanted to circle back to, or.
Yeah, I will actually want to circle back to international teams and working on different continents. Did you in particular notice strengths and weaknesses of designers in particular regions?
Oh, for sure. I see a lot of design qualities, for instance, in our China team, especially in industrial design. So really young, talented designers for sure. Yeah, but I think otherwise I can't really tell that something is super different, because sometimes I feel I wouldn't say we tend to hire similar people. We still try to diversify. Nevertheless, there is a commonality I still see. So therefore, I don't see it's super, super extreme.
I will sum it up that there is so little of us that we know each other, and we kind of look like each other. And yeah, all the industrial designers know themselves within the circle. Cool. It was really, really good conversation. We want to close it with 2 more questions. I will start with my signature one. What is your favorite color?
My favorite color is probably blue.
What shade of blue?
Although I'm a really colorful person, so I love a lot of pop colors. So I also like bright blue or coral.
Maybe the Philips logo blue? Do you think it's a coincidence?
I don't think so. No, I think then I step away from my favorite color is blue. I don't want to be associated with the Philips blue.
You are Philips. Philips is you. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. We have one more signature question that is a little bit more one we'd love you to settle into and think about. It's really important to us as we have guests on this show that we celebrate what it is to be a woman in this field, since we are a little bit rare. And we really want to give you a moment to celebrate your accomplishments and just who you are as a designer. So what we would love to know is, what is it that you bring to the table that's really specific to your experience and your skill set that just nobody else is bringing? It's really your signature mark.
My biggest strength is relationship building and just interpersonal communication. And I think with that strength, I can really accomplish a lot, kind of in a lot of roles, kind of either negotiating or kind of team building, motivating people, or kind of getting them on track, managing teams. So I think I would say this is probably my signature aspect.
Do you know that early on, or did it take a while to
realize?
It took
a while, for sure.
I like this answer because it shows that to become a better designer, it's not necessarily spending more hours sketching or learning rendering. Being very good in the like soft skills that you don't immediately associate with a design can make you much better designer.
Also, probably a better person.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, you can make beautiful designs, but and actually we have also in our own company so many amazing designs in our drawers. And of course, as a designer, you're sometimes 15, 20 years ahead of the markets. But it's really hard to bring it to life and to kind of have people buy into them. So that's also why I pivoted my focus a bit on making more beautiful designs rather than making sure that it lands somewhere and people understand the value.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You said it took you a while to realize that. Do you happen to remember like some of the first times when you really started seeing what a strength it was? You know, instead of comparing yourself and maybe seeing something lacking or being like, all I'm good at is relationships. I wish I could, 3D model like that person. When did it start to become something you were really proud of?
I think the first time I even noticed it was we have sometimes really challenging businesses to deal with. It's kind of could be multiple different reasons, either confrontational things or you're not valued as a designer, or multiple different reasons. And I had a colleague of mine that was at the time in the Netherlands, and they wanted me to manage that particular account. And he said, if you can't do it, no one can. And I was really surprised. I was a bit surprised. I had no idea what he meant by it. And I reflected for a really long time, for years, what he actually meant by that. But I think over the years, I saw that for some reason, I found ways to get things done. And I probably also had the resilience that sometimes it took years, but I repeated the story continuously. And I know that after a couple of years, things would change. And there are mini steps. And I was just already happy about mini steps. Either you get more budget, or you get a larger team, or you get more projects, or a project gets realized. Little things. So it's that was not overnight. It was every year you had mini celebrations. And I think, of course, the biggest awareness was when I moved to Seattle and we had just one designer for ultrasound. And basically I had to build a team. Design was not really seen as highly in that business. And I tried to advocate for design in many ways. I gave workshops. I brought design thinking into the company, usability thinking. I tried to be in every meeting and basically try to bring a different mindset. And just by doing that over and over and over and listen and try to support without asking, at one point people appreciated it and they were more investment in design. And of course, if after 3 years, we had then from 2 people more than 20. And that was definitely something which was recognizable also for me.
Yeah, I only want to ask, when did you even have time to sleep in between of doing all these things?
Yeah, I must say that the first couple of years when I moved to Seattle, I had not so much time to sleep. It was a heavy investment, but I enjoyed it. I think as long as I don't feel I have to do it, but I'm passionate about, I don't mind. It's then more a problem if it becomes sort of a routine. But luckily, I have a bit more work-life balance back.
I love that lesson for designers, though, that just show up and you'll be rewarded, or as a whole in a team, we'll be rewarded.
Definitely.
Why do you advocate so much for design? Maybe a silly question, but I think it's worth articulating. You've studied business and you've got all of these other angles and tools in your back pocket, yet this still is valuable enough for you to try to convince a group of people that it's a good addition.
Oh, because I see design is not making pretty shapes and colors and radiuses, which is often seen that way. Of course, it's about aesthetics and beauty, but that's a given. I think you can give us anything and we make it pretty, but it's also that you add functionality and impact and something meaningful, and you make it simpler and easier to use. And this is not necessarily which our business counterparts immediately see. Some, and I don't want to generalize. So there are people who are really advocates for design, and you don't have to convince them at all. They have worked with design, or they are design believers, and you run through open doors. But of course, you still have people, they have more classical business mindset, and it's about sales and kind of profit. And if that is not immediately seen as something profitable, you still have to convince. And again, as I mentioned, in the consumer field, it's definitely easier than in healthcare.
Amazing. Andrea, do you want people to reach out to you? And if so, what's the best way to do that?
People can absolutely reach out to me if there are any follow-up questions, or if they just want to connect. The best way would be via my LinkedIn account.
Great. And yes, your name will be in the episode description, so no problem for people to find you. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciated your time and talking to you today. It was super interesting.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for inviting me. It was my pleasure, and it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a long and heavy conversation full of great insights, and we will probably need some time to process all the information you shared with us. It's a lot for us to think about. So thank you for attending and being our guest. And we want to dedicate this podcast to all the people who are in the industry or used to be in design research, studying, who are working. If you are like struggling and wonder if this is a place for you, please be resilient, please stay, because the design you work on may be a big change for someone one day who will be using it. Design needs to be for everyone to create the world we all deserve.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, so we're Beyond Ray, the podcast, and definitely find us on social media. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn, also on Instagram. We're WID_Seattle. Thanks for listening on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher. Trying to add more platforms as we go. If you've got feedback for us, definitely reach out. If there's other people that you want to hear on the show, please nominate them. Please point out your besties so that we can talk to more cool people like we're talking to Andrea.
Absolutely.